Okay then, so welcome back into the lecture of the adrenal hormone production. And as just to recapitulate, this is the main scheme that you should kind of understand, right? So as we said before, each zona of the adrenal gland will contain a subset of enzymes and will produce certain types of steroid hormones. Remember, steroid hormones do not go into a receptor membrane bound because they are hydrophobic. So they are like lipids, they just enter the cell, right? And the receptor will be inside of the cell. But we will study this tomorrow, okay? So cholesterol, zona glomerulosa, which is the top layer, okay? It's converted in pregnenolone, and then this into progesterone. Then the oxycorticosterone, corticosterone, and aldosterone, which is a type of mineralocorticoids, produced in the zona glomerulosa. Zona fasciculata has certain enzymes like 17-hydroxypregnenolone, and this will convert into this enzyme pregnenolone into the next thing, which is the hydropentidrosterone. Okay, the progesterone also will be modified. Okay, and this so far will be also to like modify in the zona fasciculata to 11 the oxycortisol, cortisol, and cortisone, which is the glucocorticoid. Okay, sorry. Now, the aldosterone, cortisone, and the androgen have different important functions, right? In the zona reticularis, the dihydroperoxysterone, right, will be converted into androstenedione or testosterone or estradiol, right? And this converted into estrogen. And these hormones have an impact on sexual maturation of the organs. So we're gonna go very, very slowly looking at every single pathway, okay? As I said, it is a little bit overwhelming because it has lots of different enzymes, okay? So, important enzymes involved in the pathway, okay? So the conversion of pregnenolone to particular steroid hormones depends on which steroidogenic enzyme is present in that particular cell, okay? So for example, in the zona glomerulosa, cholesterol has SSC 2022 desmolase, right? This converts to pregnenolone, and then it has the 3-beta HSD that converts it into progesterone, and then has the 21 alpha hydroxylase that converted into 11 the oxycorticosterone. For example, 18-hydroxylase aldosterone synthase can only be found in the zona glomerulosa. Therefore, aldosterone, which is also the mineralocorticoid, can only be synthesized in the zona glomerulosa. So, cholesterol in the zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, okay, can be also zona fasciculata and zona reticulata. There is another type of enzyme which is called 17 alpha hydroxylase. Hence, 17 alpha hydroxylase pronenolone and 17 alpha hydroxyprogesterone and the hormones derived from them. Cortisol, glucocorticoids, is a synthesis in the zona fasciculata. Androgens are synthesized in the zona reticularis. A similar pathway exists for synthesis of sex hormones within the testes and ovaries, outside of the adrenal glands. So if we look a little bit more into detail, right, here are the enzymes in the zona fasciculata, right, 17 hydroxylase converts into 17 hydroxypronenolone, right, and then 17 alpha hydroxylase converts progesterone into 17 hydroxyprogesterone. Then 17 alpha hydroxylase, again, what it does is to convert into the dihydroepiandrosterone or DHEA and androstenone. Now this in the zona fasciculata, remember that in the other steps go to mineralocorticoids. In this step, there are further enzymes in these cells, which is 21 alpha hydroxylase. So, if you look into it, the 17 alpha hydroxyprogesterone is converted by the 21 alpha hydroxylase into 11 deoxycortisol. There is a further enzyme here, 11 beta hydroxylase, that finally converts cortisol and cortisol into cortisone. As we will study tomorrow lecture, cortisol and cortisone, right, are very, very important on mediating anti-inflammatory reactions in the body. So that's why cortisone creams are used for when there is eczema or inflammatory conditions. Okay? So how about in the zona reticularis? In the zona reticularis, the dihydroepiandrosterone gets modified by the 3 beta HSD to androstenoid, and then the 7 beta HD to testosterone, which it obviously will impact in the masculinization and have an impact also in the reproductive hormones. Then there are aromatases, which aromatases convert into estradiol, and the estradiol convert into estrogen through an aromatase pathway and will impact to the reproductive organs. So we will study the physiological function tomorrow lecture. So here then it's the pathway that I've shown you before, but includes all the enzymes, okay? Some of these enzymes, when they don't work, produce very severe disease, okay? So for example, we're gonna study adrenal hypoplasia or overproduction of androgens, right? Or if there is no aldosterone, what happens, or what happens if one of these enzymes doesn't work and there is too much cortisol, okay? So we will study this on the physiological function, but basically too much cortisol because of a tumor or too much ACTH secretion leads to adrenalectomy. So that will be explained to you in the future lectures. So I have added also here some of the other enzymes that convert and are important. You don't need to memorize them all. As I said, we're gonna go through in the ones that are important for the disease. This is a very complex pathway, okay? So important enzymes involved in the pathway, in the cortisols, okay? The synthesis of cortisol is prevented by any of the several dysfunctional enzymes. Other steroid hormones may be reduced in excess. For example, block or deficiency of 20-alpha hydroxylase diminishes the production of cortisol and aldosterone and increases the production of hormones. So if we go back to the pathway, what you need to understand is that these pathways are interrelated, okay? So if we stop here and we stop here, we have more substrate in progesterone and pregnenolone that will drive into this and produce excess of androgens, okay? We will see this in a minute. So obviously it's all tied together. So let's say that we don't have enough 20-alpha hydroxylase because there is a mutation in this gene or because there is lack of this gene, of this protein or enzymatic activity. It will not produce corticosterone or aldosterone. Equally, if there is no this gene, right, 20-alpha hydroxylase, what would happen is that there will be no production of cortisone or glucocorticoids, right? So the pathways are stopped here, okay? In the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, but there is a lot of these sub species of pregnenolone and progesterone. So then what is going to happen is that this will go into the zona fasciculata into more conversion of 17-alpha hydroprogesterone and progesterone. And this will increase through alpha hydroxylase the increase in the zona reticularis, right, of the androgens, okay? So how does this represent in physiological terms? If there are mutations in these two enzymes that cannot produce mineralocorticoids and glucocorticoids, there's going to be a very big reduction of mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid deficiency, but at the same time, there is going to be an increase in androgen production. So, for example, masculinization of feminine traits, more testosterone, and increase on androgen production. So, adrenal cortex and sex hormones. Under normal circumstances, the adrenal cortex secretes a small quantity of male sex hormone called androgens as the dihydrotestosterone, or also known as DHEA. Androstenedione and testosterone and the female estrogen estradiol. So they are produced in very small fashion, but then they will target obviously the reproductive system to produce more. Only significant in adrenal disorders, for example, in adrenal tumors, can also secrete more androgen. Okay? So, we have covered the structure and biomechanics, and now we've done the overview of steroid hormone synthesis and some of the hormones pathway. We're going to look into the structure and biochemical property of steroid hormones. Now, we're going to do in the following lectures tomorrow, because otherwise it's a lot to assimilate, the regulation of the glucocorticoids, secretion and physiological action. This is the most important for you guys. And the regulation of mineralocorticoid secretion and their physiological action. The sexual steroids and androgens and estradiol, we will cover it in the part of the module of biological reproduction. Okay? Now, In the next part of the lecture, remember, we go into a little bit of the biochemical. I don't think for your level you need to know the biochemistry. We just brushing through it for you to have little bit of a knowledge, but you don't need to memorize it. So as we see, we start for the progestogens, and as we said before, it starts with a carbon 21 steroid hormone, right? That comes from the cholesterol, okay? And the cholesterol has been modified to lose part of the molecule, and this is done by the side chain cleavage enzyme 2022 desmolase, okay? And this gives rise to pregnenolone, okay? Pregnenolone will be further metabolized by 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, and it will produce the progesterone. So here we have the molecule of the progesterone after the modifications. Again, you don't need to know how the molecule looks, right? Just understand that there is a side chain cleavage and then a hydroxylase function. So basically, hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase enzyme, what it does, all oxidoreductase enzymes, short chain alcohol dehydrogenase, and this is the function of this enzyme. What catalyzes oxidation of alcohols? Okay, and how it does this, as you can see here, from NADP to NADPH, and basically what you can see is, as it says, right, the hydrogenase, it takes the H out of the molecule, right? You can see here how it modifies the enzyme. And this can go both ways. It's bidirectional modification. What about the other enzyme, the 3-beta HSD, catalyzes NAD plus dependent oxidation of the 3-beta OH group. Again, I'm just talking today about the biochemistry, but you don't need to know. Okay, this is too much information for your level. But obviously, because we will study in detail the function of the hormones, it's good to know a little bit of how these hormones are built. Oxidizes the pregnenolone to form progesterone, and oxidizes DHA to androstenedione. The 17-BHSD catalyzes NADPH-dependent interconversion of 17-BOH with 17 ketone in C19 and C18 steroids. So again, this requires the exchange, and basically it produces this second molecule with a H group added. And it converts androstenedione into testosterone, right? And this happens in the androgen pathway of testosterone production. And this can have a reverse also function from the testosterone, can be taken out, the H group, and go into the estrogen pathway. So progestogens 21 carbon steroid hormones, okay, for pregnancy, exerts actions in the uterus, in pregnancy and menstrual cycle and breasts. A slow genomic action, and A-ring reduces metabolites and pregnant, exerts neuro sedative effects via GABAergic and chloride channels. So, glucocorticoids. Again, you can see the typical shape of the glucocorticoid, C21 steroid hormone, and the enzymes that basically catalyze it, remember, is side chain cleavage enzyme desmolase, and then 70 alpha hydroxylase, 21 alpha hydroxylase, and 11 beta hydroxylase. That's why you can see so many H groups here, okay? And it produces the final cortisol. And cortisol, we're gonna study what it does in the lecture tomorrow. Now, important enzymes in the pathway. As we said, the side chains that here converts into pregnenolone, and then the 3-HS beta to progesterone. Then this one here, 17 alpha hydroxylase, that gives in the zona fasciculata these two components, and then it gives rise to cortisol and cortisone. Okay, so glucocorticoids, this is the biochemical structure, carbon 21, steroid hormone. Remember, steroid hormone are formed from cholesterol. And this is the full name of the glucocorticoid, or corticosterone. So, what are the functions of glucocorticoids is to elevate the plasma glucose and are pivotal and super important. We will study that tomorrow in the stress response. The end product of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is the glucocorticoids. So the hypothalamus, okay, produces, remember, corticotrophin releasing hormone that goes into the pituitary. The pituitary secretes ACTH, adrenocorticotrophin hormone, goes into the circulation, and in the adrenal activates the production of glucocorticoids. Has major anti-inflammatory actions and is transported by cortisol and by the globulin. So mineralocorticoids is on the other chain, and as you can see, the enzyme again is the side chain cleavage enzyme desmolase, the 3-beta HD hydroxylase, and 80-hydroxylase aldosterone synthase. Okay, and it produces aldosterone, but the aldosterone has another function. Okay, aldosterone is important for the content on salt. Here is what I've shown you before, that each specific enzyme is expressed in different layers. So if we look a little bit into aldosterone, but we will study this more in detail, right? What does the regulation of aldosterone? Aldosterone, right? It regulates through the renin-angiotensin, the pathway, the levels of increased potassium in the fluid and sodium. So it's very important also for regulating the osmolarity in the blood. Let's say that there is dehydration in step 1. There is decreased sodium deficiency or an hemorrhage. That decreases in blood volume, decreases in blood pressure, and signals to the kidney. At the same time, the liver produces angiotensin, okay? The angiotensin with the increase in renin, right, or signals to the lung and increases angiotensin 2. Then this will signal to the adrenal cortex, okay? And the adrenal cortex increases aldosterone, and the aldosterone, but it has an impact into the kidneys and increases sodium and water reabsorption and increase the secretion of calcium and H into the urine. Okay, so basically it's an homeostatic regulation of the sodium content, the salt in the blood. Okay, so this increases the blood volume, and then blood pressure increases until it returns to normal situation. So this is what is known as the renin-angiotensin aldosterone. But the aldosterone is the important mechanism in the adrenal gland, okay, to impact in the kidney, but it requires angiotensin and renin from the kidneys to be able to increase the sodium and water reabsorption and increase secretion of potassium. So if we look a little bit on the pathways that we have studied, what we have is the hypothalamus, okay? So the hypothalamus will go into the secrete corticotrophin releasing hormone, right? Which will affect the anterior pituitary to secrete ACTH, adenocorticotrophin hormone, and this will produce the adrenal cortex, okay, to put cortisol. Cortisol at the same time, have a negative feedback on the anterior pituitary and a negative feedback on the hypothalamus to lower the levels of its secretion. So cortisol secretes is the last element of the HP axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is a little summary of the enzymes and the products of the adrenal cortex steroid biosynthesis, right? Again, if we run slowly through it, we have the cholesterol. It goes into the cholesterol into the cell using the star and the transporter that we talked about. And then this cholesterol goes into the mitochondria. The CYP11A1 transform this into pregnenolone, and then there are enzymatic reactions with hydroxylases and the carboxylases that produce progesterone and the oxycorticosterone, and then basically end up being producing aldosterone. Aldosterone in the zona glomerulosa will impact the kidney to reabsorb sodium concentrations, okay? Then the other pathway is production of cortisol in the zona fasciculata, and this comes with other enzymes which are present only in the zona fasciculata, and those are CYP21, CYP11B, and also the HSD2, and modifies cortisol into cortisone, and this has an important function in the inflammation process. And then we have the zona reticularis, which will have androgens, which are important for sexual maturation. We will see this in another part of the lecture. So mineralocorticoids, C21 steroid hormone, okay, stimulates again the sodium resorption and potassium secretion in distal nephron, colon, and salivary gland. So this is very, very important because otherwise it leads to dehydration, right? And we need to have homeostatic regulation of this in the blood, okay? And it's produced renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, okay? It's obviously regulated by the renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone, right? Remember that angiotensin and renin are through the liver and the kidney, and obviously signals to produce aldosterone, okay? And obviously they have slow genomic actions. So androgens. Androgens are steroid hormones again, but they lack one of the carbons, is carbon 19. If you look at the pathway itself, right, the enzymes are again the main one, which is the 2022 desmolase, 70 alpha hydroxylase, and it produces the what is known the dihydropenylderosterone, DHEA, which obviously is a sexual hormone, right? So what about androgen? So androgen, it's a C carbon 19 steroid hormone. Enzyme involved is the obviously cleaved by 2022 desmolase, also 3 beta HSD, 17 alpha hydroxylase. And this is the name of the androgen, androtensodione. So again, we can convert androgens into testosterone, and this is mediated by a further enzymatic reaction. So you can see here the enzymes involved. Again, the side chain cleavage enzyme, 2022 desmolase, 3 beta HSD, hydroxylase 17 alpha, and 17 beta HSD. So you can have here the enzymatic part of this area, which basically produces the testosterone and the androgen with these two enzymes. So the importance of androgen are phenotypic virilization and masculinization, very important on the masculine traits. So it's a product of the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal, and that's why we're going to study the mechanism of actions of the androgen steroids in the chapter of hormones of the reproductive biology at the end of the module. So don't worry now, right? We're going to go tomorrow more in depth to understand the glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, the sexual androgens and sexual hormone steroids. We will study at the end of the module in the part of reproductive biology, okay? So it's genomic actions via androgen receptor, and estrogen receptor also has slow actions, right? And basically it produces changes in the organ that it targets that we will study in the future. So the estrogens, which are the feminine one, right? Enzymes involved, again, side chain cleavage enzyme 2022 desmolase, 3 beta HSD, 70 alpha hydroxylase, 17 beta HSD, but then it has an aromatase, okay, enzyme, which adds the diol group and forms the estradiol, right, which characterizes the estrogens, right? So it adds an aromatic A ring. And this is the part that was lacking. So you have androstenedione, which is both pathways. Aromatase goes into estrogen, or aromatase in the testosterone converts it in estradiol, okay? And this happens in the zona reticularis and has an importance in the development of sexual organs. So estrogen, carbon 18 steroid hormone, and conversely to the androgen testosterone, it has a phenotypic feminization. So feminine, obviously, features. It's a product again of the hypothalamus, pituitary, ovarian, or gonadal, and also placenta. We will study this in more detail in the reproduction, okay? But as you know, the hypothalamus will produce the hormones and the pituitary and then affect the ovarian axis. So it has a slow genomic action and rapid non-genomic action, and is not known the receptor, okay? So in this is estrogen receptor, okay? But we don't know the other receptors, okay? So basically, to summarize, what you need to kind of get your head around, okay, is a little bit print out this pathway. Don't try to memorize all these structures, right? But you need to understand, right, a little bit this pathway with each zone, what it does, and the end product, okay? And this is the one take home message, okay? And you don't need to know the biochemical change in every specific change, okay? So we're just going to again go into some of the questions at the end of the module, i.e. tomorrow, because this will be the part of half of the module. I will be uploading the answers to these questions, okay? So we're going to read the questions today. Like adrenaline and noradrenaline, which hormone helps to manage stress? Androgens, glucagon, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, or estrogen? Sex hormones are secreted by the zona glomerulosa, the gonads, zona reticularis and the gonads, zona fasciculata and the gonads, all the endocrine glands in the body. Glucocorticoids regulate their own secretion by inhibiting the pituitary secretion. So corticotrophin releasing hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, melanocyte stimulated hormone, renin or follicle stimulating hormone. Which hormone has diabetogenic effect or basically glucose homeostasis? Aldosterone, DHAI, cortisol, testosterone, or estrogen. Okay? So with this, we finish the lecture for today. Okay? And tomorrow we'll be going a little bit more fancy and more interesting on the regulation of each specific hormone. Today was very biochemical and descriptive on the role of the regulation of glucocorticoids and their physiological actions, which are important to understand the disease. Also, the regulation of mineralocorticoid secretion and their physiological function. We're going to go through each one, how it interacts with the HP axis that we studied last week, and their biological functions. Okay? So from today, it is bye-bye. There is a lot of information, guys, and I have sent a link for the meeting for those that have questions if you need to contact, okay? So I will put the link number here so you all have it, and let me write it in here. It's 738 090 125. So this will be our meeting ID for those that have questions, right? As I said, you don't need to understand all the biochemistry, only knowing some of the enzymes. Everything will make more sense when we study